businessman identified as Emeka Nwachukwu has been abducted by unknown gunmen at his residence in Kosobosu, Barutan local government area of Kwara State. It was gathered that the incident took place around 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday, leaving the community in fear. However, on Thursday morning, the kidnappers contacted Nwachukwu's family, demanding a ransom of 100 million Nigerian nairas for his release. The family, devastated by the situation, is reportedly negotiating with the abductors while calling on the authorities for swift action. The community of Kosobosu has been increasingly concerned about rising insecurity, with this latest incident further heightening tensions. Meanwhile, residents have urged the government and security forces to step up their efforts in curbing the rising wave of kidnap cases in the state. When Sahara reporters contacted the spokesperson for the State Police Command, Tunajira Yemi, she said, efforts are underway. Police officers have been mobilized to the bush to rescue the victims. The recent abduction of businessman Emeka Nwachukwu by unknown gunmen in Kosobosu, Kwara State, opens up a crucial discussion about the deepening issue of insecurity in Nigeria. The facts of the incident are chilling. Nwachukwu was kidnapped at his residence, underlining the vulnerability people feel even in their homes. The kidnappers' demand for 100 million Nigerian nairas as ransom brings a human element into focus. The overwhelming emotional, financial, and psychological burden placed on the victim's family. At the heart of this situation is a grim reality that communities in Nigeria, particularly in regions like Kosobosu, are facing. In recent years, kidnappings for ransom have surged, becoming a common crime across various parts of the country. People are no longer safe, not even within the walls of their homes. For a small community like Kosobosu, such an event is particularly disturbing. This incident, which occurred around 8:30 p.m., underscores the boldness of criminals who are now unafraid to strike in residential areas, putting ordinary citizens at risk. The question arises, what has led to this rise in abductions? One possible explanation is the weak and overburdened state of Nigeria's security apparatus. Despite numerous attempts by authorities to combat these crimes, the frequency of abductions continues to escalate, suggesting that current strategies may be insufficient or misaligned with the actual threats. Demanding 100 million Nigerian nairas, a sum that is out of reach for many Nigerian families, illustrates the callousness of the kidnappers. While to them, the victim is merely a pawn in a financial transaction, for the Nwachukwu family, this is an unthinkable ordeal. They face the grim reality of having to negotiate their loved one's freedom, all while knowing that failure to meet the kidnappers' demands could have tragic consequences. At this juncture, we need to ask whether law enforcement agencies are truly doing enough. While the spokesperson for the State Police Command, Tunajira Yemi, assured that efforts are underway, with officers being mobilized to the bush, one must question the efficiency and effectiveness of such interventions. Are the police equipped to handle the complexities of modern criminal enterprises like these? Nwachukwu's abduction is not an isolated event. It reflects a much deeper problem within Kwara State and Nigeria at large. Kosobosu, like many other communities, has experienced a steady rise in kidnappings. This incident adds fuel to an already burning fire, intensifying the sense of fear and frustration among residents. Critics have long pointed out the disconnect between the promises of safety from government officials and the actual security situation on the ground. While efforts may be underway, the slow pace of progress often leaves citizens feeling abandoned. The calls from Kosobosu residents for more substantial government and security forces intervention are urgent. They reflect a community on the brink, struggling with daily fear of who might be the next victim. Looking at the broader picture, it's easy to criticize the government's handling of these cases. There is a perceived lack of urgency and prioritization when it comes to combating insecurity. While the government often expresses a commitment to dealing with kidnappings, the measures taken rarely seem to have long-lasting effects. Critics argue that this may be due to inadequate funding, poor training of security forces, and a lack of intelligence gathering, all of which make it difficult to stay ahead of organized criminal networks. Furthermore, many citizens are left asking, why does the government appear reactive rather than proactive? In regions like Kwara State, where kidnapping has become rampant, there should be preventive measures in place, more patrols, better intelligence networks, and community involvement in keeping the peace. The statement from the police command, though meant to reassure the public, doesn't provide much detail. What exactly are the police doing? Are they collaborating with local vigilante groups or neighboring states to ensure that the kidnappers have no place to hide? Without such transparency, the public is left to speculate, often assuming the worst. The larger impact of this incident is on the societal fabric itself. When people lose faith in the ability of the authorities to protect them, they may resort to self-defense mechanisms or vigilante justice, further destabilizing the rule of law. This can lead to an escalation in violence as criminals become emboldened, knowing that they can act with relative impunity. Meanwhile, law-abiding citizens may begin to take matters into their own hands, creating a volatile environment where lawlessness reigns. But beyond security measures, there is also the economic toll to consider. With every high-profile kidnapping, investors, both local and international, are discouraged from bringing business into these regions. The reputation of a state like Kwara becomes tainted, seen as too dangerous for development. In turn, this stifles economic growth, trapping communities in a vicious cycle of poverty and crime. From a critical standpoint, one might argue that the root of the problem lies in poor governance and a lack of accountability. Crime thrives where institutions are weak. It is not enough for the government to react to kidnappings after they occur. There needs to be a systematic approach that focuses on prevention. Community policing, for instance, could be a viable solution. By integrating locals into the security framework, authorities could gain better insight into the movements and activities of criminal groups. Additionally, there needs to be better coordination between state and federal security forces. Often, these kidnappings span across borders, with victims being taken to neighboring states or regions. A disjointed response only gives criminals more time to evade capture. Critics advocate for a more unified security strategy that involves intelligence, sharing, and rapid response teams that can move across states without bureaucratic delays. Finally, a long-term solution must address the socioeconomic factors that fuel crime. Poverty, unemployment, and lack of education create a breeding ground for criminal activity. Until these underlying issues are tackled, any security measures will merely be treating the symptoms, not the disease. As we dissect this troubling incident, it's important to ask, what do you think should be the government's next steps? Should we hold security forces more accountable? What solutions would you propose to curb the rising tide of kidnappings? Comment below and share your thoughts. Let's start a conversation about how we can collectively work towards safer communities. Your insights could be part of the solution. The kidnapping of Emeka Nwachukwu highlights the broader issue of insecurity in Nigeria. While his family negotiates for his release, the community of Kosobosu and beyond waits anxiously, hoping for a resolution. Yet, this is not just an isolated event. It is a reflection of the challenges faced by many communities across the country. The government's response, while promising, must evolve to tackle the root causes of this insecurity. Only through comprehensive action can we hope to restore a sense of safety and peace to the region. The story of Emeka Nwachukwu's abduction speaks to a national crisis that has spread across Nigeria in alarming proportions. Kidnappings have morphed from a sporadic crime into a highly organized, profitable business for criminal groups. What makes this case so poignant is its setting in Kwara State, a region where many believe they were insulated from the more violent acts seen in other parts of the country. Unfortunately, this event shatters that illusion. As we delve deeper into the underlying causes, it's important to acknowledge that Nigeria's security challenges are multifaceted. While some may point to poverty and economic inequality as the root causes, others argue that corruption within law enforcement and governance plays a pivotal role. Too often, security funds allocated to protect citizens are siphoned off, leaving under-equipped police forces to fight an uphill battle. This brings into question whether law enforcement agencies are truly up to the task of confronting the increasingly sophisticated methods used by kidnappers. When you strip back the emotional layers of Nwachukwu's abduction, what remains is a raw economic reality. Kidnapping in Nigeria is a business, and a lucrative one at that. In a country where unemployment rates remain high and opportunities for the youth are scarce, some individuals are lured into criminal activities simply out of desperation. The ransom demand of 100 million Nigerian nairas may seem astronomical, but it underscores the profitability of such crimes. From a critical perspective, one might ask, why is it so easy for criminal groups to demand and secure large ransoms? The answer lies in the inability of the state to fully regulate and monitor the flow of money across its borders. Families, left without recourse, often quietly pay these ransoms, further emboldening kidnappers. This vicious cycle continues because there are few consequences for the criminals and little protection for victims. The response from the government and security forces to incidents like this one has often been described as inadequate, both in timing and execution. Critics argue that while there is always a show of force after high-profile abductions, there is little in terms of strategic planning. For example, police spokesperson Tune Ejaridiyemi's statement that officers have been mobilized to the bush is reassuring on the surface, but it doesn't answer the critical questions. What intelligence do they have? How do they plan to rescue Nwachukwu without endangering his life? And what steps are being taken to prevent future incidents? Many critics argue that these kinds of responses are too generic, revealing a lack of actionable intelligence. The use of vague statements like efforts are underway gives the impression that authorities are merely reacting to events, rather than working proactively to dismantle kidnapping rings before they can strike. There is also a growing demand for accountability. Who is being held responsible for the apparent failure of security in regions like Kwara State? It's not enough for security agencies to issue statements. There needs to be a transparent assessment of what went wrong and what can be done differently next time. The public wants to see clear plans, timelines, and measurable results. Another criticism often leveled at the government is the failure to involve local communities in the fight against kidnapping. Many communities have formed vigilante groups or local defense forces to protect themselves, particularly in areas where state security forces are absent or ineffective. Yet, these groups operate outside the law, and their activities are often unsanctioned by the government, leading to mistrust and tension between local and federal authorities. From a critic's perspective, community involvement could be a game changer in the fight against kidnapping. Local residents are more familiar with the terrain, know the people involved, and are better equipped to notice suspicious activities. Integrating them into formal security structures could provide the intelligence and manpower that state forces currently lack. However, such a plan would require significant trust building, training, and regulation to ensure these community groups operate within legal frameworks and don't become vigilantes taking the law into their own hands. Media coverage of kidnapping cases like Nwachukwu's also plays a crucial role in shaping public perception. The initial fear and panic caused by such incidents are often amplified by sensationalist reporting. While it is necessary to keep the public informed, there's also a risk of creating widespread fear, leading to public hysteria or even the normalization of these crimes. This, in turn, may fuel more criminal behavior as perpetrators see the impact their actions have on communities and recognize the weakness in law enforcement. But media outlets can also be instrumental in keeping the government accountable. Investigative journalism can shine a light on the inefficiencies within the security apparatus, expose corruption, and provide the public with the information needed to demand change. Additionally, by focusing on success stories where kidnappings have been foiled or victims have been rescued, the media can offer a more balanced narrative that encourages public trust in law enforcement. Beyond the immediate shock, kidnappings have a lingering psychological effect on communities. In Kosobosu, this abduction is likely to trigger feelings of anxiety, mistrust, and helplessness among residents. When people no longer feel safe in their own homes, they may begin to alter their daily routines, living in a state of constant fear. This affects not only their mental health but also the social fabric of the community. People may become more isolated, fearful of associating with strangers, or even suspicious of neighbors, leading to the breakdown of communal bonds. In the long term, this collective fear can erode the sense of unity and shared responsibility that once held communities together. It's essential to address the psychological and social consequences of such crimes, providing counseling services for victims' families, and ensuring that the community receives support to rebuild trust. As we continue to unpack the layers of this incident, it's important to focus on solutions. While law enforcement clearly has a role to play, this issue cannot be resolved solely by the police. A multi-pronged approach is required, one that addresses the socio-economic drivers of crime, reforms the security sector, and promotes community-based solutions. One of the root causes of crime in Nigeria is unemployment. The government needs to prioritize job creation, particularly for young people, as a means of reducing the appeal of criminal activities. If more young people are gainfully employed, the pool of potential recruits for kidnapping gangs will shrink. The days of reactive policing must come to an end. Security forces need to invest in gathering actionable intelligence and developing strategies that prevent crimes before they occur. This requires not only better training, but also access to advanced technology that can track criminal networks and their movements. Kidnapping is a national issue that requires coordination across state lines. Criminals often move their victims to neighboring regions, knowing that local police forces are restricted in their jurisdiction. A more cohesive national approach would ensure that no state operates in isolation when combating kidnapping. Finally, there needs to be a greater focus on educating the public about how to stay safe and what to do in the event of a kidnapping. This includes everything from installing basic home security measures to knowing how to report suspicious activity. As you listen to this analysis, it's crucial to reflect on your own thoughts. Do you feel that the government is doing enough to protect its citizens? How would you handle a similar situation if it happened in your community? We encourage you to share your perspectives in the comment section. By discussing these issues openly, we can push for more accountability from our leaders and collectively work towards safer communities. The kidnapping of Emeka Nwachukwu is a stark reminder of the growing insecurity facing Nigeria. While the specifics of this case are tragic, they are emblematic of a larger, systemic problem that requires a comprehensive response. Citizens are calling for action, and it is time for the government to deliver on its promises of safety and protection. Only through a coordinated, well-planned effort can we hope to see an end to this cycle of violence. Until then, the community of Kosobosu, and Nigeria as a whole, remains on edge, waiting for the next victim to be taken. This is not just a local issue. It's a national crisis that requires urgent, sustained attention. Your comments and opinions will help shape this ongoing discussion. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day.